morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. So, we are doing the lesson People as Resource, and in yesterday's class, we started learning about the various aspects which contribute to people as a resource in our country. And we took up the part of education. We saw how, through the years, after independence, the number of institutes in India have increased, the number of colleges in India have increased, and what all the government efforts are in seeing that the number of, or the rather the literacy rate of our country keeps increasing. And one of the most important efforts in this manner was Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. We started learning about Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan yesterday. So now let us go into detail of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Let us learn each and every aspect of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, because with the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, the right to education has become a fundamental right in our Indian constitution, along with the right to equality, right to freedom, our religious rights, our cultural and education rights, right against exploitation. All these were fundamental rights earlier, and along with that, the right to education also has become a fundamental right of the citizens of India. So let us learn about the details of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, how it is getting funded, who are the people who are behind this project, and how it is affecting the lives of we Indians. So, as a intervention program, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan has been operational since 2000 and 2001. However, its roots go back to 1993-94 when the District Primary Education Program, that is the DPEP, was launched with the aim of achieving the objective of universal primary education. The district primary education program over several phases has covered 272 districts in 18 states of the country. The expenditure on the government on the program was shared by the central government 85% and state governments 15%. The central share was funded by a number of external agencies, including the World Bank, the DFID, and the UNICEF. By the year 2001, more than $1,500 million had been committed to the program, and 50 million children covered under the program. It is an impact assessment of phase one of the district primary education program. The authors concluded that it has been effective. Yes, and nevertheless, they concluded that the investment in DPEP was not a waste because it introduced a new approach to the primary school interventions in India. So the right to education, the RTE, originally originated as a district program. It covered 18 states and 272 districts. And there was lots of money which was given by the World Bank and UNICEF also for this program. So $1,500 million is what was committed to this program. That's a huge amount of money. And of course, it was a success to a certain extent. And this was further, it was taken up by the government of India, and the amendment to the Indian Constitution was made, wherein we got the Right to Education Act (RTE), which came into force in April 2010. Some educationists and policymakers believe that in the passing of this act, the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan has acquired the necessary legal force for its implementation. So now let us see what the goals of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan are. What are the main goals of this program, and how is it actually benefiting the children? In what way it is being implemented? In what way is it actually benefiting the children of India? So in 2015, its goals were to open new schools in areas which do not have schools, and to expand existing school infrastructure and maintenance. So existing government schools which were there, these schools were to be expanded, better infrastructure, better building, better facilities, and to maintain them in a proper way, and obviously to also open new schools in areas where schools were not existent earlier, address inadequate teacher numbers and provide training and development for existing teachers. The shortage of teachers, especially in government schools, is very, very high. Uh, Sometimes the shortage of teachers runs in thousands also. That is the amount of shortage that they face. And adequate training also is not many times given to these teachers. So that problem also has to be addressed by the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan to see that the teachers are trained properly, their development happens so that they can give proper education, they can impart proper education to their students. It also tries to provide quality elementary education, including life skills, with a special focus on the education of girls and children with special needs, as well as computer. So, mainly the focus over here is on elementary education. Elementary education is the education between the ages of 6 to 14. This particular place is where the focus is on for Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, and focus is also there on skill development so that once the child finishes school, they are able to get a job. And again, another focus is also there on the education of the girl child, children with special needs, and also computer education. So these are the areas where Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan mainly tries to focus on. Right. So this was all about the part of education in developing people as a resource. If anybody has a doubt up till now in education, you can please ask me. Any doubts from anybody about the role of education in developing people as a resource?
Okay.
No doubts? Okay. Okay. If there are no doubts, then we'll go ahead and then we will start covering the part of health. Health, again, another very, very important factor and something which we are facing with even with this pandemic of COVID. A healthy person can fully realize his potential and can become an asset for the economy. An unhealthy person, on the other hand, shall not be able to realize his potential and will become a liability for the economy. See, something which you need to understand very clearly is the concept of an asset and the concept of a liability. An asset is something which has positive value, that is mainly an asset, and with this positive value you can utilize it to create further, you can utilize it to contribute in your work. Yeah. And the best examples for asset is a building, money, it could be land, it could be machinery. All these things are assets which are used to create more productivity. That is the meaning of an asset. And on the opposite side, we have a liability, which is basically something which has a negative value. Negative value in the sense that it is going to be a burden for me or any person. A liability is a burden for a person, something which has to be paid back, that is a liability. In case a person takes a loan, that loan is a liability for that person because he has to repay that loan, that is a liability. If there is a sick person in your house or sick person in the house, that person is like a liability because that person needs to be taken care of constantly till they come back to normal health. So that is a liability. That is the meaning of asset and liability. So if you understand the meaning of this asset and liability very clearly, the remaining parts in your economy subject is going to be very, very easy. So everybody is clear with this idea of asset and liability. Does anybody have doubt about what asset and liability stands for?
Sir, assets is understood.
Asset you did not understand. Asset again is something which has positive value. If I have a piece of land with me, on that land I could either do agriculture, I will utilize that land to create more like agriculture. I could put a building on that piece of land and start a factory. So again, that land is used to create more, to produce more wealth for me. So that is the asset. That asset can be utilized to create more wealth for myself. That is the meaning of asset. There are plenty of examples of asset. Cash is an asset. Capital, money, investment, that is an asset. Land, building, furniture, all these things are assets which I utilize. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Clear, Dhruva? Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So an unhealthy person shall not be able to realize his full potential and can be a liability for the economy. The national health policy of India is mainly aimed towards improving access to health services and improving nutrition, especially among the underprivileged people. The government health system is composed of many tiers of hospitals. We have the primary health centers at the bottom tier, and then we have the district hospitals and also the state hospitals. So there are many levels in the health system, wherein the primary health system is mainly there in almost all the villages, so that the health of the people in the villages is looked after. And then at the upper level we have the district hospitals, which we have here in Belgaum itself. This is followed by community health centers in bigger tehsils and block level towns. The district hospital The district hospitals are there at district levels, and further, we have medical colleges present in major cities where doctors of all specialties are present. So, this is the structure of the health system in India. The reach of healthcare services is still too little, but reduction in infant mortality and improvement in life expectancy over the years have shown that the healthcare system has indeed helped in improving the quality of life. After independence, the health care system in India was almost invisible. There was really no healthcare system in India after independence, because whatever was maintained, it was run by the Britishers, and that too, it was not anything very great. So after independence, India had a huge task of starting right from the lowest level, and that being the setting up of primary healthcare centers. And then the next level, there was the setup was of community health centers in bigger tehsils and block level towns. And then we had the district level hospitals, and in bigger cities there are medical colleges which are run by specialty doctors with specialties for each and every type of ailment. So that is the healthcare system which was developed by the government over a period of time right after independence. Now how it has helped is, definitely it has improved the quality of life. Definitely, the life expectancy, means the amount or number of years that I am expected to live, has increased, and the infant mortality, means the chances of a baby dying right after it is born, that is called as infant mortality. This has also reduced to a very, very large extent after independence over the period of years. So this is the health infrastructure which was right from 1951, that is after independence, till 2001. You can see the number of primary health centers. It was just 725 in a country as huge as India, which is mainly, many times we say that India exists in the villages more than the cities. We have a larger amount of population in the villages. So for a village type of population, just 725 PHCs is almost not as good as not that. But this has increased to 1,63,000 in the year 2001. the number of PHCs. The number of dispensaries and hospitals also has increased to 43,000 in 2001. The number of beds that are available, that also has increased. The number of doctors has increased, and the number of nursing staff also has increased from 18,000 to 7.5 lakhs almost in the year 2001. But still, we have seen that during the present pandemic, many of these beds and all that which is available was still not sufficient for the COVID pandemic that we faced, and in the especially in the second wave, you would have read lots of news wherein when beds are not available, doctors are not available, they are understaffed. Still, there is plenty of scope for our healthcare facilities to increase much more than what is presently available. So, has everybody understood this part of education and health? Are there any doubts by anybody?
No, sir.
Okay, okay, good, right. So, coming to this vicious circle and the virtuous circle, which we have already learned earlier in the same chapter earlier. So, this poverty trap, because of low income levels, we see that the low level of education and healthcare is there, and because of that the quality of the human capital is very low, and due to that again we see that there is low productivity, and because of low productivity again there is low income. This is one type of cycle, and because of low income that leads to low economic growth, there is again low savings, low investment, and that leads to low economic growth. So this is the complete vicious cycle of poverty, which is restricting the growth of development, the growth and development in the country. So the main idea over here should be to break away from this vicious cycle. It has to be broken away, and the only way it can be broken away is first and foremost by providing the best of education and the best of health care to the people in the low income group. Once the best quality of education and the best quality of health care is given to the people in the low income group, only then can they break away from this vicious circle. And once this vicious circle is broken, then obviously the cycle does not continue, and we come out from this low productivity area, from the low economic growth area. The progress of the country will only be possible if this vicious cycle is broken. Okay, so now that we have people as a resource, we have been putting a lot of investment, a lot of money has gone into Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, into providing education for the people. A lot of money has gone into providing proper healthcare facilities for the people. But still, we are in a situation where unemployment exists to a large percent in our country. Let us see what kinds of different kinds of unemployment that we have in our country, and then we will also see what possible things can be done to change this scenario for India. When a person is actively seeking a job but is unable to get employed, he is called as an unemployed person. Even though this person could be qualified, he could not be qualified also, but he is of the working age. That is from 15 to 59 years, people are considered to be of working age, and only can be termed as unemployed if any one of them is without gainful employment. Gainful employment means employment wherein he gets to earn money. That is called as gainful employment. Additionally, if a person voluntarily does not want to work, he cannot be termed as unemployed. Sometimes there are people who wantingly really do not want to work. They really are not at all qualified, they are not at all earned anything, and in that working age, they really do not want to work, they do not want to contribute to society in any way. So, wantingly, if I am, voluntarily, if I do not want to work, I cannot be termed as unemployed. Now, looking at the different types of unemployment that we have in India, first and foremost, we have seasonal unemployment, which is very rampant, mainly in the agricultural sector. In the agricultural sector, we will see seasonal unemployment because the laborers in the farms are not required throughout the year. They are mainly required during the time of sowing, and more they would be required during the time of harvesting. So the middle months, the labor is not required. So seasonal employment is the type of employment which is more prevalent in rural areas. The farming cycle is season based. It is season based. Farming is always based dependent upon the rainfall and the season which is prevalent in that area. So there are certain months which are quite busy for a farmer, mainly as I said, the sowing time and the harvesting time, which is the most busiest for the farmer. There are many other months when a farmer is without any kind of work. After the sowing is done, obviously the farmer is not going to have work. Only occasionally he would be going for putting a little bit of pesticides and fertilizers to the plants. Otherwise, throughout the day he would not be having that much amount of work. And again, when it comes to harvesting, that time he will be having more amount of work. Yeah, I will come back to that cartoon later. First, we will learn about hidden employment, and then we will come back to learn about. We will see that particular cartoon. Yeah. So, hidden employment is again we find this in many parts of India. This type of unemployment is also more prevalent in rural areas. To understand this, let us take the example of a family with 8 working members. Okay, a farming family with 8 working members means these members are of the working age between the age of 15 to 59. All of them are working on their farm. All 8 members in this family are working on their farm. The size of the farm makes it possible to be efficiently managed by 5 people. Means the farm is not a very huge farm that it requires all 8 members of that family to work on that farm. 5 people are sufficient for working properly and efficiently on that farm. These extra 3 people which are there are actually not contributing in any way to the betterment of that farm. There is no growth in productivity with the addition of these 5 people into that farm. So their potential actually could have given better results or could have been utilized somewhere else. These 3 people who are extra on that farm, they could have actually been utilized somewhere else because they are not contributing in any way extra to that farm. So this situation, which I gave you as an example right now, it can be seen mainly in family-owned shops and family-owned farms, where all the family members may be working in the same shop but not adding any substantial value to the output of that shop or farm. So this kind of hidden employment we do find in many places. Now what happens is this hidden employment contributes to the cost because these people also need to be paid. Even though they belong to the family, the payment would be done. It could be done in kind, it could be done in cash. But more importantly, rather than getting paid over here, they could have gone to some other place and worked where actually work was there, where actually they could have contributed. So these 3 people are called as being hidden unemployed. Has everybody understood this idea of hidden unemployment? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll just show you. Yeah.
So can you give a definition without example of this?
Yeah. In fact, I have this particular cartoon over here. I would like all of you to just take some time and read this. It will make this idea of hidden employment very clear to you in a funny way. So here, this guy, this engineer, he's asking his boss for more workers, and his boss says that I have assigned three more engineers to help you on your project. And out of these three people, one of them is on paternity leave. Means he's taken leave because he is has a child born at home, so he has taken leave. One person is in hospital, and one person we will start. He will start working only after 1 month. So it is like he has given three engineers to him, but those three engineers are not existent at all. They are not there for him to work. They are employed but not available over there. It's just a joke for all of you to understand. This particular type of hidden unemployment, very easily you can understand. Normally, when you guys were coming to school, we used to give lots of group activities. If you remember, right? We used to have group activities, and there would be groups of maybe three students, four students, or five students. But if you see, when the group activity was actually being happening, it could have been either making a chart or drawing something or preparing something. When this group activity was actually happening, there would be maybe two or three students who would actively work and complete the entire activity, and the remaining balance two students were there only for time pass. They would be just sitting and watching this group activity happening. But ultimately, at the end of the full activity, at the backside of the chart, all those five students' name would have come, wherein only three people would have really worked in making that activity, and two people were just there in the background to, I don't know, maybe to give some kind of moral support, or just because they could not fit anywhere else. I think all of you would have experienced this very clearly.
Exactly.
Yeah, Dilna says yes. Yeah, correct. You would all have experienced this. Correct. So those two people who were actually not doing anything, not contributing in any way, but they were part of the group, and their name was included in that activity at the backside of the chart. Those two people are the people who come as hidden employment, hidden unemployment. They are there but do not contribute in any way. Okay. So I think with this example, this hidden employment is clear to everyone.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Then we have educated unemployment. Again, a large part of our educated people in India, unfortunately, are unemployed. And this reason for this educated unemployment could be many things. Let us learn about this. The problem of unemployment among the educated youth is very high in urban areas. Nowadays, even highly educated youth like graduates and postgraduates are unable to find a job. Many analysts they suggest that most of the highly educated youth do not possess employability. But most of the analysts say that it is because of the demand supply gap. While many technically qualified people are unemployed, there are many jobs remaining vacant because of lack of properly trained person. See, our education system in India mainly concentrates a lot about on theoretical knowledge. Our education system is designed in such a way that the knowledge that is imparted to you is mainly theoretical in basis, and it is not practical. It is not practical oriented. A very fine example of this is the math subject that you have. Okay, please do not shout at me, and please do not tell your parents that Karthik sir is telling like this, but it is a real live example. I feel many of you would have experienced it. Now in your maths subject, many times the question would have come to your mind is, why do I need to learn this? In what way am I actually going to use it in my practical life? Is this yes or no? Many of you would have thought about this.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Correct, na? Now, say for example, I think give me a topic like linear equations. Do you have linear equations in mathematics?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You have linear equations, right? So now, can no, we will do a small activity over here, which will make it more easier for you to understand. this problem of educated unemployment. Now, this topic of linear equations, you tell me in practical real life, where are you going to use this linear equations? Anyone can tell me that in your practical real life, where are you going to use this real, not in any test or anything, in real life? Once have you anytime seen your parents use this linear equations anywhere? Anyone? In test, what test? I'm not talking about tests and all that. I'm talking about real life,
No, sir.
other than your education. Sujana says no, Pooja says no, Delna says no,
No, sir.
no, 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 no. Many of you students are saying no because even though linear equations might be there somewhere, you are not being taught the practicality of that subject. You are not being taught the practicality of that subject. But if you ask me, I will tell you many scenarios where linear equations can actually be used in your practical life. If anywhere in the future you go on to become, a software developer, a software programmer, you go on to start coding, you write your own programs and all that. The algorithms which are used over there, many of those places where these equations actually find place over there. But what happens is our education system is built in such a way that the practicality of the subject is not taught to you. So you feel that this is very much theoretical. You do not understand the practical implications of these subjects. So what has happened in our education system is many of the people who are educated, they would be, well qualified. Absolutely right, Dalnas, correct. In architecture, linear equations are used, but this is not told to you when you are learning these linear equations. So the problem arises over here is that I am not able to implement my education practically. So when you are not able to implement your education practically, the gap between the qualified person and the job which is available starts arising. And that is where we have this situation of educated unemployed. And our country is filled with people who are highly educated, who are highly qualified, but unfortunately they are not able to get a job. And it is not like jobs are not available. There are plenty of jobs available. The people who are giving you these jobs, they want to look at something which is called as employability. This person, once he finishes his education, once you finish your education, once you finish your school, once you finish your college, you come out as a graduate, you may come out as an engineer, you may come out as an architect. There are n numbers of, job choices that you can do. But how do I implement what I have learned in the real life, in the work life? This is what the employer mainly looks at, and sadly, this is what is lacking in our education system. These because these people are not employable. So, of course, last year our government of India has introduced the new education policy, and with the introduction of this new education policy, we will see that the education is more practical oriented, more job oriented, more skill oriented, so that your skills get developed. And once you finish your education, you are more employable by the bigger companies, the bigger organizations. So this is what the changes the government is trying to do with the implementation of the new education policy. So has everybody understood the meaning of this educated unemployed? Anybody having any kind of doubt?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay, that's good. So let us quickly recapitulate what we did today. We learned about Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. We learned the details of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. What is that, Priyanka? The meaning of allopathy. Allopathy is mainly the Western medicine that we take, that is called as allopathy. Whereas the Indian medicine that we have, it is called as Ayurveda. Okay. Yeah. So coming back to our recapitulation, we learned about Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, the importance of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, and how the government has made it a part of a constitution, making it as a fundamental right to education. And then after Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, we learned about the role which health plays in the in making the human resource as an asset rather than a liability for the people, for the country. And then after we learned health, we learned about unemployment, which is a big problem for our country. The human resource not being employed, even though we have a large amount of human resource, this also is a huge problem for our country. We learned about hidden unemployment, we learned about seasonal unemployment, and then we learned about the educated unemployed in our country. So this is all that we did today.